Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
I'm Scott Warr. Have you ever wondered what drives someone to keep going when every part of their body and maybe even the clock is telling them to stop? In this episode, we're going to sit down with author Shannon Hogan, whose new book, The Unforgiving Hours, the grit, resilience, and perseverance at the heart of endurance sport, captures the raw, often overlooked beauty and endurance, the grit, the heartbreak, and the glory that unfolds in the margins of the sport. Shannon compiles stories that will challenge our definition of toughness. And they're not just about runners, it's other endurance sports as well. Because sometimes the most unforgettable moments don't happen at the front of the pack, but in the quiet, gritty hours when no one's watching. Now, Shannon, many of the athletes in your book don't win their events. I think that's one of the things that I took away from this. They push themselves to the limits just to finish the race or finish the event. What do you think that tells us about the true heart of endurance sports? Or what does that tell you about the true heart of endurance sports?
Excellent question, Scott, and thank you so much for the invitation to join you here and on this morning. So at the heart of these stories and the endurance experiences of most of our nation, Trail Runner Nation, it's not about the podium. How many people can fit on a podium at the end of an event?
Maybe one.
Sometimes there's a second and a third step
good point.
on which to end a race. But for the vast majority of people, and the majority of your listeners, it's not about the podium. These stories absolutely have nothing to do with competition. That doesn't mean they're not the greatest endurance stories that perhaps you haven't heard. So we sometimes assume that endurance means competition, but it does not. So I'm thinking fastest known times. I'm thinking great adventures. I'm thinking even streaks. Someone who every morning gets up, no matter the weather, no matter the circumstances, no matter where they are in their life, and they just go out and they run 5K, or they go out and they run 10K, or they go to the pool and they swim for an hour, and they do it for a year, or they do it for 3 years or 5 years. So these endurance events are absolutely relatable in many ways, and capture, like you said, the heart, right? The marrow of what it means to put it all out on the line with absolutely no guarantees, and then figure it out as it proceeds to go terribly wrong.
You mentioned these endurance, goals where people go out and run for a year, consecutively every morning, getting up, rain or shine, or feeling good or not. But sometimes it made me think when you said that, sometimes that endurance event might be just that morning run. It doesn't have to be calendarized. It can be just that morning that defines you of who you are.
I couldn't agree more. And I offer 304 pages of testament to that exact, to that ethos and to that spirit. And that honed and developed, I would suggest, is the very thing that helps propel people to keep going when they are turned inside out. And it's 3 a.m. and you are facing something called power line inbound.
Beautiful. Now, you're just not an author, Shannon. You're a competitor yourself, a pro mountain bike racer. I mean, there's many accolades and credentials that you have behind the stories. So you come from a participant and not just an observer.
So the participant element is helpful because it allows an opportunity to really be authentic about how much goes into a big event. Anyone who's ever had an A race in the endurance category can will nod as they listen. It's a lot of work. The preparation. That, I mean, when people talk about endurance, it's like getting to the start line, right? The amount of product testing, there's gut check. You need to figure out your nutrition. You need to figure out who, if you have a pacer, are you bringing crew? Where are they leapfrogging to you forward on the course? How are you going to get there? Are you going to acclimatize because you're flying in to a place that's at elevation and you live at sea level? You know, do you have all your gear? What's the weather going to be like? What are you going to do afterwards? Meaning, are you going to be able to walk? Are you going to be able to, get on an airplane and successfully get yourself home? There's an athlete in the book who is a long distance cyclist, and suffice it to say, she tells the story of after competing in Race Across America, which is roughly a 3,000-mile road cycling race from Oceanside, California to Annapolis, Maryland. She couldn't get on her flight because her saddle sores were so atrocious. She couldn't sit for the 6-hour flight from the East Coast back to the West Coast. So anyways, the point is the preparation and the amount of work that goes into a big A race certainly warrants a kind of reverence, a kind of understanding. And I would like to think that my experience gave the incredibly generous athletes who allowed me to interview them, it provided the right amount of respect for the work that they have done.
Shannon, it just dawned on me as you were talking. The definition of the title, The Unforgiving Hours, is not just when the shotgun goes off or the gun goes off and you cross the finish line. Those unforgiving hours can be 3 months prior to that, where you have to get yourself out of bed and tie your shoes, or trying to get on the plane after riding across America with saddle sores. Those unforgiving hours aren't just race day. And it just occurred to me that this book now has a much larger meaning than what I went into it and read it. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Brava. Exactly. You have done my publisher's work for me. Thank you very, very, very much.
There goes Scott reading between those lines, and
I'm telling you, amazing.
And you wrote the title thinking, I hope these guys, somebody out there reading this, gets that. So well done, Scott.
I knew I was in good hands, Scott John. I knew. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Scott. As you look back over your career, and I'm thinking back to, races that I've done and others that are out listening can think of their races. Are you most proud of your best finishes or your toughest finishes as you look back and you try to put your hands around, hey, these are the ones I want to talk about. These, as I exit this planet, this is what I'm taking with me. What race is it? Your victory or your finish?
Great question. I would say the events where my crew were whoop whoop the loudest. Because those moments when you're able to bring other people along with you are the ones that lift you the highest. So the ones where my crew or my family, my very patient husband, my very tough kids, the ones where they had tears rolling down their face and, they wanted to celebrate the loudest. Those feel like the best and most memorable moments to me. And I've seen a lot of great finishes, so I'm always a spectator when I'm on a course, when I'm running on a trail. I'm enjoying what I'm able to see. Think about our sport. Where else can you, as a mid-packer, share the trail with the best GOAT, level people that ever were, to experience an out and back, and to have the pros come running back towards you and to give them an attaboy or an attagirl right there in person, eyes meeting their eyes, and doing the fist bump, and I mean, that's really incredible. What a lucky lot we are to get to trail run with each other, with such amazing elites and pros.
And that is magic. And I've had the thought, this very trail, the legacy of this trail goes back decades, and the people that we're storied and we've heard about and talk about and read about ran this exact single track. This is the one that all the stories happen on right here, and I'm on it, and I can even train on it.
We are a lucky lot. I don't know what we ever did to inherit such a fabulous pastime filled with the best people.
That's right. So this book has a chapter that's dedicated to specific stories of endurance athletes. I'm just curious. I mean, this could be an encyclopedia with stories. It could be multi volumes, and maybe there's a second version coming out. I don't know, but there's some really good stories here, and they're not just running and trail running, and that's one of the things I like. I think there's a lot that we can learn from these other endurance sports. How did you go about figuring out what stories you wanted to include in the book? Where did you get these stories?
Terrific question, Scott. It was very difficult to narrow it down. There are more stories to go, so may this just be the beginning of this format. But at when I had to make the decision about what made it into this version, the 2025 release, my instinct was, as a journalist, what stories need to be preserved in the archive?
Mm-hmm.
And what do we need to have primary sources, first person accounts captured and preserved for the future? And so I very much that remained my lodestar as I went. What stories haven't been told? What do we need to capture for our official endurance archive?
Was it difficult to have them filter out and keep this contained within the chapters that you have, or did you want to just keep writing and write version 2 and 3 all in the same first release?
You've captured the difficulty of the quest. Each one of these athletes certainly could have their own tome, not just book. Tome. They are exceptional people. They were vetted by me up one side and down the other. So these are people who believe in their sport. They give back. Good deeds, good acts are part of who they are as athletes, and part of how they spend their time when they're not with their family, when they're not at work. And I mention that because all of these athletes have 9-to-5 jobs. And again, that goes back to those listeners who are like me, mid-packing, and wondering, how do we fit all of these things in our life? These are great examples. These athletes have real jobs and actual families, and they look just like your next door neighbor.
That's right.
What I'm curious about is that you've got people from a handful of different sports. They're all endurance related, but different sports, and different people were in front of you. Did you actually interview them and get a chance to talk to them? And I've got a follow up to that. Go ahead.
Yes. So you did ask, like, how did I find these people? Who are they? I either know them or through one degree of separation, practically knew them. And it was very important to me to make sure that we were highlighting the best of each sport. Meaning, if you read about an athlete in this book, not only are you getting a great performance captured in a chapter, I can guarantee they are the flagships of their fleet as people, as competitors, as good sports people. So they're folks that if you hand this book to a 15-year-old, you are encouraging them to read about someone worth reading about. And there are 2 15-year-old heroes in this book. So I'm all about our young people enjoying sports stories as a great way to develop their sense of adventure and their inspiration as they, go out into the world.
Now, since we are a trail running podcast, of course, we were thrilled to see what chapter 1 was about. We've talked about Gunhild Swanson many, many times on the podcast. We've met her. You're absolutely right. She's an amazing lady. That we just found out. We were just talking to one of our friends, and this year, 2025 Western States, we are having an 80-year-old man that is starting the race this year. And Jim King will also be returning to Western States, and I believe he's pushing 70. I hope if Jim King's listening and he's not pushing 70, I hope he forgives me. But for those who don't know about Gunhild Swanson, tell us a little bit about her story and focus on what did you learn from her when you were interviewing her about her grit?
I'm so glad that we are taking the time to talk about Gunhild. I know you have on the podcast, but more words. This is a case of more is more. Her grit, to answer your question, begins with her preparation. And I cannot emphasize enough how thorough all of her training preparation, how deep it runs, how wide it flows. So that's a good lesson. We think it's easy to think you just show up and you just summon the grit that day. Oh no. Oh no. So it's about intense training plans. It's about very specific laminated time cards so that she could keep track of hitting every aid station, every check-in, at what time, keeping her cognizant of where she stood in terms of race cutoffs, which is an issue at Western States because they do keep tight cutoffs. And she said there's never been a time that she hadn't done a race that she hadn't customized her kit. That is, she would sew her vest in a certain way so that it didn't bounce, or she would make sure that everything she was wearing was, just perfect. Her son described her as having this kind of stoic German ability to just, be very businesslike. I think that's an important reminder. If it's a big stage like Western States, and there is a lot of hoopla that you don't get at your local fat ass race or you're the turkey trot you sign up for in, the mid-November. If it's a big race, you better be prepared because you are going to get hit with a lot of external kind of, waves that perhaps you couldn't have foreseen. So trust me, she did all the work plus. So that's one thing about Gunhild. She was very generous in all the interviewing. She was very generous with access to both her son and grandson, Chris and Turlin, respectively. She was generous with all of her data. This is something that's very curious. I mean, I think you're either in the Trail Runner Nation, we fall into 2 categories. We're the data people and we're the don't give me any data people. She is the former. She is super specific about her numbers. She knows, she's very thoughtful. She has all of her previous times, previous years. She's comparing her, because she had two Western States buckles from previous attempts, right? So she had towed the line twice, and she had two buckles from Western States when she showed up in 2015. So she had all that material. I can't say enough about her preparation. She also, in terms of grit, the amount of humility, I in the book I describe it, modest almost to a fault. I don't want to. She just doesn't. She doesn't have any sort of give me the spotlight. It's all about me. It's about my brand or something. This nonsense that sometimes you see in really great athletes. None of that. And I think that's important. This is a really important part of this book. These athletes are not looking for the spotlight. In fact, I had to talk most of them in to letting me interview them because that's not their MO. When I said I wanted to write about your performance, and she said, but here's the thing, I don't want to take away from the real heroes that day. And I said, what do you mean? Gunhild, it was the most, Andy Jones Wilkins called the most exciting finish in trail running history. It's the most exciting day on the Western States Trail. How could that possibly, what are you talking about? And she said, well, the real champions that day were Rob Krar and Magdalena Bollet. The way they finished, they're amazing times, and I don't want to take away from what they did that day. And I thought, isn't that the most gracious, lovely thing, that she was worried about our awesome pros at the start of that finished the race 14 hours before she did.
I such great insight, and I'm just sitting on the edge of my seat as you're telling these stories. For those who have never even heard of Gunhild Swanson, in 2015, she finished the race with 6 seconds left on the clock. I think it was the closest to non-finishing of any Western states in the history, and so people were cheering. I happened to be there, and there were more people cheering for her than Rob Krar, who won the race. And in fact, one of the things about our community, and you talk about it in the chapter, was Rob Krar. I don't know if he went home, took a shower, ate breakfast, slept, came back, and he actually went out on the course and ran with her into the stadium, which I think just shows how awesome our community is. But as you tell her personality, I just wanted to get a little background on why this was such a great performance, and it really was. It was. I get chills just talking or thinking about it.
Chills maybe chills it sums up that chapter in understatement. And in addition, I would say you're absolutely right, Scott. It says everything about about our sport, that Rob Krar on hobbled legs. He described his legs as hobbled. And he walked to the last aid station with his wife, and he described how they were holding hands, and he said, he loves his wife so much. She's such a great person, and crew mate and all of these things. And she's an ultra runner in her own right, so she's just an exceptional person. He said they were holding hands headed towards the aid station to watch the last finishers of the race. And we were holding hands, not just out of love, but because he couldn't trust his legs, having run so hard the day before. And, because he'd finished, like I said, 14 hours in front of our Red Lantern that day. Another person who was very generous in interviewing, so kind, and every nice thing you've heard about Rob Carr, I can confirm is absolutely true based on my experience as a journalist.
I'm glad you're sharing this story. And not to give anything away out of the book, did you talk to her about her thoughts on that last lap around the track? Because at Western States, you finished with a lap around the track or a partial lap. Did you get inside of her head or what she was thinking as she watched the clock count
Yes.
down? What did she say? Or do we need
Yes.
to get the book for that?
Well, absolutely. but in her she's just got the best sense of humor too. I failed to mention that when I was describing all of her attributes. She was so funny. Gentlemen, she said to me, I trained for this race for so long. I've been a 100-mile ultra runner for all of these years. She said, she's been running for decades, right? And she said, she turned onto the Placer High School track on that fateful day in Auburn, California, and on the biggest ultra running stage in the world, at the oldest 100-mile race in the world. And she said, it hit me like a lightning bolt. Oh, now I understand why ultra running plans include track workouts.
Beautiful.
Love it.
One of the things that occurred to me, and if you had more to say about it, I don't want to cut any. Okay. One of the things that occurred to me when you mentioned the modesty of these athletes, that when you spoke to their family members, their son or their spouse, I'm wondering, did you get more information from their family or from the individuals themselves? Where was your source of all these great stories?
Excellent question, Don. Yes, it was a Herculean task because when you are interviewing modest people, of course, they don't ring their own bell. They don't hammer their own gong. It was very difficult to bleed the information out of these folks. Also, they're very dynamic. It's very hard to pin people down, right? Because they're out in the backcountry.
Yeah.
They're not sitting around cubicles and taking emails and taking phone calls. So there was the dynamic element of their lives and their personalities. And to the last athlete, gentlemen, to the last athlete, when I said, I would like to interview you for this performance and what it meant to your community, they said, what are you talking about? And I repeatedly had to explain, I've asked everyone in your sport, what event or what moment meant the most to you? Tell me the performance that leaves you inspired, I asked the pros. And these are those stories.
Oh, interesting.
So I had to hammer these poor folks. And I was like, no, I really, really, really want to tell this story. And because they are unheralded athletes, because their legacies are not burnished in large font headlines in newspapers and, our kind of dwindling magazine archive, they didn't believe me. And I said, no, this story needs to be preserved. We need this part of your sport to be captured in ink on the page forevermore. And so with that, everyone eventually agreed because it wasn't about them. The minute I was able to take the spotlight technically off of them, and I said, we need to do this for your sport. And then they because good works are their thing. Absolutely. How can I be helpful? Was their response.
So when you ask the pro athletes, the pro ultra runners, what's the most inspiring story that you can think of? They all pointed to the person that came in with seconds to spare. I mean, that was the inspiration for the pros up top. Yes. Was that seconds to spare story.
Yes. Seconds to spare. Well, in the case of that finish, the pros I talked to said the cheering that Gunhild received was greater than any cheering that I have ever received breaking the tape.
Wow. I think if you go to the Auburn track now and listen, I think you can still hear remnants of those cheers. I think it still exists.
Every man, woman, and child in like a 5-mile radius, all at the same time when she stepped foot on that track, and there were so few seconds to go. The collective scream all at once was literally, "Go!"
So let's move on, Shannon. You're more than an ultra runner, open water swimmer, pro mountain biker. The rest of the stories are completely different from trail running.
Mm.
I'll ask you, of the remaining stories, which one comes to mind as one of your favorite inspiring stories?
Such a good question, Scott. Thank you. Well, it's like my children. I certainly can't choose
Right.
between them. But I will say, just for your listeners, there are lessons for trail running in ice mile swimming.
Yes.
There are lessons for trail running in extreme mountain biking in Alaska. It doesn't seem like necessarily that there's a through line, but my assertion is if you are an endurance trail runner, you have more in common with a long distance mountain biker or a marathon swimmer, like an English Channel swimmer. You have more in common with them than you do the fast twitch fellas down at the track or the people who are able to hammer, sub 4-minute miles. You really are more closely related to the marathon swimmers in this book, and their tips and tricks and hacks absolutely apply to trail running endurance too. But to answer your question, as we are gathered here in the Trail Running Nation, an additional chapter that may be worth discussing that will amuse this crowd specifically, I had the great pleasure of learning about the Boston Double. And the Boston Double is this kind of part Fight Club, part Dunkin' Donuts secret menu, only in Boston, where registered Boston marathoners, that is people with legit bibs on Patriots Day, mid-April, show up at the finish line on Boylston Street in Back Bay in the damn dark, like 3 a.m., and they queue up on the finish line and no one's around. Again, going back to this modesty thing, this theme of like not needing the spotlight, but doing it because it's just freaking awesome. They line up at the finish line at dark 30, and they proceed, because the course is closed, to run from Boylston Street in Back Bay all the way to the Boston Marathon start line before the Boston Marathon. And then they have to run around and stay warm until their wave is called, and then they go run the Boston Marathon. So yeah, that's 52.4 miles. And here's the rub. They get no credit. So for example, they finish the race and their time is posted as, they finished the Boston Marathon. This year is the 129th running of the Boston Marathon, this storied race, the oldest marathon in the whole world. But they don't run it on fresh legs. They run it with 26.2 mile warm up before they do the thing. And no asterisks next to their name, no credit on the official finishers list. They do it for the love of the sport. And this beautiful course this immense experience, which is running Boston. And I had the great pleasure of digging deep into this world of pure tenacity and and 52.4 mile resilience with none of the credit.
Okay, I have a couple questions. They're just
Yes.
burning.
So many.
So the first question is, if I qualified for Boston, I would want to run my very fastest, best performance because it's so hard to get in, right? So why don't they run the marathon, get their time, and then run back? They're running their A race, I assume, on tired 26.2 mile legs. Why don't they do it the other way around, Shannon?
Because there's only one time that the closed course is free for their swimming upstream antics.
Okay. So here's the other question. How many of these crazy folks are there? Is there just 2 or 3? Are there dozens?
Well, those who say don't know and those who know don't say.
Okay. Okay. There you go.
It's a tight circle, but the point is every single year they've done it, they do it, people are doing it, and it's just the secrecy around it is part of the just epic nature of the thing.
So if you know, you know, and if you don't know, then you got to figure out a way to know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The point is that there are awesome people doing really cool things all around us. And maybe this story will cheer you up one day when you read a headline in the newspaper about some other topic, about some other subject that just really makes you bummed out. And you'll just be able to look back on the Boston Double and say, you know what? There are more awesome people out there in the world than not awesome people.
Shannon, as you say that, I'm, and I don't want to offend or disparage anyone out there, but we're in the social media time of life where there's Strava, there's FKTs, and all of your runs, if you want, can be public. Right. And a lot of people get extreme pleasure out of that, and good for them. But then there's the other people that are probably doing this Boston Double that maybe they're not on Strava and they're not posting on social media. They're just doing it because of the internal drive to see if they can do it, and no one knows. And I get a little giddy about that there are people out there that are doing it just for themselves, and not for the fame or the notoriety. I like that.
And not only is it entirely likable, it's a good ethos, and something that I found in the book over and over, that something you mentioned, Scott, is that this is all intrinsic. And that is it's a small thing, but it's a very important thing when an event is blown out and you are going great distances. So you can get away with some extrinsic drive, like buckle fever, for example, or some kind of something pulling you to the finish. Let's say, there's a beer garden, or there's there's going to be a big event at the end, or, even just seeing your people, knowing they're there, and you have this extrinsic thing sort of pulling you. When you go long that is not an unforgiving minute or a few unforgiving hours, but I'm talking unforgiving days, you really cannot rely on the external factors. It has to be from within, based on my interviews with these athletes. And when you have that internal thing, not only is it cool, not only is it likable, but it's the secret sauce. It's the thing that gets it done. So yeah, if you want to be here for a good time, maybe an external series of external things can help out. But if you want to be here for a good time and a long time, that internal intrinsic part of the equation absolutely is critical.
So one other one that I want to get into, because I'm sure Don did not read this chapter, and I think that it's going to interest him, because Don has, if you have gotten to know Don through the podcast,
Yes.
he jumps in, he gets this little wild hair, and he doesn't dip his toe figuratively or metaphorically. He jumps with both feet in. And right now, he has both feet and his torso in these cold baths or cold plunges.
Yeah.
It's all I hear about on our runs is, oh, Scott, you need to come over and jump in my ice bucket or whatever it is. And in chapter 8, you talk about the ice mile. Let's talk about that for a minute and see if Don may be signing up for this challenge.
Excellent lead in to chapter 8. Yes. So I'm here to back Don up. Yes, his plunging, there is science behind his euphoria.
Yes.
And you can learn all about it in chapter 8. So what is ice swimming? When you imagine,
I've never heard of ice swimming, by the way, Shannon. I've heard of ice baths. I've never heard of ice swimming.
It's called skating, Shannon. It's called skating.
Hockey.
So ice swimming is as old as our species, because in places cold and dark with very short winter days, it is a cultural and social tradition to spend time in the water as a reset. In other words, it's what we fight, these short days and the gloom and doom of, you can imagine living in our coldest, darkest places. Think Scandinavian postcard, right? of a day with 3 hours of light. And so what people have done since the beginning of time is gather, that is, find community and spend time getting some exercise, that is, taking a sledgehammer to some very thick ice, or bringing your chainsaw to the river or to the lake and cutting out a big block of ice so you and your mates can half dare each other and summon the strength to jump in. So this sport of plunging, the sport of dipping, is legit, and there's science to back it up. So Don, as he goes on and on and on about the pleasure and the benefits of this cold water plunging, I'm here to back it up.
Thank you.
What you may not know, however, is that there's actual swimming done in these waters. The International Ice Swimming Association puts on events. Athletes come from all over. I mean, so many athletes, like thousands of athletes sign or thousands of events, like 500 athletes, 1,500 events they'll sign up for at one of these meets. So that's the traditional swim strokes, if you can imagine, in a pool carved out of a lake or a river with lanes. and the rest of the spectators are standing on ice in the middle of the body of water. And there's also, besides events put on by the International Ice Swimming Association, there is the International Winter Swim events, and they have things, they put things on all over the world, and athletes gather and swim in this very, very cold water. An athlete featured in the book went to the International Winter Swim meet in the one of the most northern rivers in Sweden, and she swam 50 meters, a 50-meter race in 28-degree water. So for the runners and who don't know anything about this, the rules of ice swimming are very much like the rules of English Channel swimming, and that is no neoprene, no booties, no gloves, no special swimsuit, meaning it's a traditional, men can wear jammers up to their knee. They may not go farther. A woman's bathing suit may not go above her clavicle, for instance. So these are regular bathing suits, not made of neoprene, and they are able to wear one swim cap, and it may not be neoprene. Okay, so it's a silicone or it's a latex swim cap, like at your YMCA later today. Okay. One swim cap, pair of goggles. You may wear earplugs if you choose, and your regular bathing suit. Nothing on your hands, nothing on your feet. This is English Channel rules swimming. The one difference between ice mile swimming and English Channel rules swimming is when you swim a channel or a marathon distance, that for a race that, or an event that is sanctioned and verified and ratified, for it to be English Channel rules, you are allowed to be to receive feeds. That is, someone on a kayak or a boat may take a water bottle with a rope tied to it and chuck it to you where you are swimming, and you may pause and tread water, and you may drink your electrolyte mix or your protein drink. You may eat food they throw to you from a bag, and you then throw it back to, they may not touch you, but feeds are allowed in English Channel swimming by English Channel swimming rules. So you might have heard of people swimming the Catalina Channel off of California. You might have heard of the Around Manhattan swim. That's a 28 and change mile swim around the Isle of Manhattan. You obviously would have heard of the swim from Dover, England to France, the 22-mile English Channel distance. But in open water swimming, you can receive those feeds using English Channel rules. In ice mile swimming, you may not receive any feeds. They don't want you stopping. It's so cold. This chapter in the book is about a woman who went for the American ice mile distance record. And so you can learn all about a swim in 39.2 degree water for more than 52 minutes. And again, going back to your point, Scott, about what endurance really means and where the unforgiving hours really add up, it took 2 years of preparation for this swim. And it's exciting to hear about all the benefits of her swimming in very cold water, and what it teaches us about what athletes look like.
Well, Shannon, I've got to say that I'm not real happy to hear about this chapter, because I was really boasting about my 5-minute stretch without any movement at all, and then getting out and feeling like I was ready for the hero's welcome.
Oh, you'll always get that from me, Don, because I know about cold water. I have the great pleasure of swimming with some of these incredible marathon swimmers. And right now, Puget Sound is 46 degrees and nobody's in a wetsuit and they are getting it done. So you will always have a friend in me that if you're getting in for 5 minutes, you are enjoying great benefits in terms of reducing inflammation. It is a mental reset. There is evidence that when we experience awe in the form of things like that kind of intense water and enjoying the outdoors, that it literally resets our brain in such a way. Neurologists call it can see it on MRIs. It's the default mode network of our brains. MRI studies show that self-rumination and negativity that generate from this DMN, it shuts off. And the self-rumination and the negativity and like all the self-criticism that we experience, like a switch, that gets turned off. And it's something about cold water. They're still trying to figure out, how it all comes together, but it's something about awe, and cold water does deliver awe. That's for sure.
So respect for those people that are actually moving, because I don't even want to open my hands when I'm in there, because that is extremely cold. And I couldn't imagine actually keeping myself afloat, swimming for a mile. And there's a lot of movement to keep up. Are there some stories about people turning into ice cubes? I mean, I've got to think this is not advised by anybody with any rational thinking.
Excellent question. So here's the thing. It can be done. The longest swim we have, sanctioned, recorded, ratified by the International Ice Swimming Association, is 3.7 miles at just below 5 degrees Celsius, just below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So the human body can do it, right? It's like Bannister's Mile, right? Like nobody wants to think that it's possible, but it's possible. And then once it's possible, other people feel like, okay, it can be done. It can be done safely. So in this case, I would say it's important to have examples of it. Might not be for us. It may not be for our trail runner nation. But the point is, with preparation and with good training, that there are lots of inspirational athletes out there, and maybe because they look like your next door neighbor, maybe you don't even know it.
Wow, the real races are in between our ears and not necessarily underneath our feet.
True.
And you never know what's inside of that person's head.
Yes.
And they're practicing some amazing things that are out there.
Yes.
As your book is full of these stories, inspirational stories, all of them. And we just threw a dart at a couple chapters, but each chapter could absolutely stand on its own. And what a great book. I'm glad you have another edition coming out, because there's a lot of stories out there that we need to hear.
Did she say that? Did she commit to that? Shannon, did you?
Yeah, she did.
We saw you visually making some gestures, but I don't think audibly she committed to that unless her publisher is willing to commit. Is there a second version?
I committed her to it.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah,
thank you, Don. I've got your next ice plunge covered, and you've got my next my next book.
Deal.
Yes. Too many stories. They need to be told. These stories need to be archived. Unfortunately, what's going on in the consolidation of newspapers and magazines, there just aren't enough journalists covering our extreme sports. And so I'm committed to making sure that these stories get properly preserved.
Add that to your resume, your long list, because you do have a long list of accomplishments, and open water swimming being one of them. I was going to ask about chapter 4, but I'll leave that to the listeners to go out and explore for themselves about this young teen, Lynn Cox, that did some open water swimming.
And I want to just say, just to give you a high level so that you go and buy the book, because it's that good. Besides the ones that we talked about, there's chapter 2 is about a team of adventurers who race 750 miles by sailboat or by rowing to Alaska. There's another race, and I think, Shannon, you participated in this race. It's and I'm going to kill the name, La Ruta de los Conquistadores.
Exactly right.
Where a bike race where this guy, a multi-day race, and he did it on a single speed bike.
Right.
Now, does everybody do it on a single speed bike?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So it's a great story. And you'll notice going back, you'll see that every story is set up so that a reader can say, well, if someone can do that event with only one gear, hey, maybe if I had 12, that's something I could do. If someone who's 70 can do that race, well, I'm not 70 yet. That's probably something I could do. And just because that person did that race on a 26-inch bike with no maps and no GPS and no fancy equipment back in the 90s, now that we have 29ers and now that we have good technology and now that we have good cold weather gear, if they could do that on a 26-inch bike, heck, maybe I could sign up for that. So every chapter is set up in a way that the reader sees the space between how a racer or athlete experienced conditions or a situation that was harder than it needs to be. And for most people, they can do it in a way that's not that difficult. And their experience will be relative to that. Well, at least I'm not running 2 marathons today, they'll say to themselves. At least I have GPS. This athlete didn't have GPS. At least I am not disabled. There's a chapter that, you'll experience that or you see that. So everything is relative to something else, especially in endurance, and readers will enjoy that. There's space for them to dream big in this book.
Well, can I add to that? If someone can swim a mile in 39-degree water, I can certainly get across the pool at 75 degrees.
Exactly. You've got it, Don. You're on to me. Perfect.
I was going to say, my pool's like 70 degrees, and I think it's freezing.
Well,
I don't know why there's not ice on the top of that thing. Hey, Shannon Hogan, thank you for your time today. The book, again, is called The Unforgiving Hours, which now has new meaning to me. The grit, resilience, and perseverance at the heart of endurance sport. If you want to have a fun read, if you're looking for inspiration, if you're just looking for a good book with some great stories, go out and pick this book up.
If you can't get out of bed to get on your next trail run, read a chapter and then tell yourself, I think I can get it done.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a high honor to spend time with you this morning. You've nailed it perfectly.
So if you're not getting in the ice bucket or ice tub, which I don't think you should recommend, Don would recommend, I don't recommend it yet. Put on your shoes, lace them up, find a good friend or friends, and get out on the trail and run.
Mas.